The last comment I want to make is that Carmen has been doing a great job taking in a lot of comments from the people that are listening and participating digitally. And we just haven't been able to keep up with all of them and answer them. Carmen is committed to share those with the scientific committee for the meeting and ask them to respond and take them into consideration as they put together their recommendations to come out of the meeting. So we know that you've sent these messages. We haven't been able to respond to all of them, but we'll get there. Don't worry. Thank you.
Okay, so we are on our penultimate session, and this session is looking at vaccination in places where virus is endemic. And we got 4 short presentations from China, Latin America, Indonesia, and Egypt. So Dr. Hualan Chen is head of the National Reference Laboratory at Harbin in China, and she's provided us with this presentation. She can't be here in person, but I believe it's been pre-recorded. So good to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be invited to give this talk. In this presentation, I will share our experiences on H5 and H7N9 influenza control in China, and hope our experiences is helpful for the avian influenza control in other countries. China is the largest poultry producer country in the world, and over 17 billion poultry, including 4 billion ducks, are reared annually in China. Many birds, especially ducks and geese, are often reared in open fields with no biosecurity measures, and therefore they could be easily attacked by wild bird viruses. It's really a hard work to protect the huge number of poultry from avian influenza virus infection. Many countries in Europe and North America control highly pathogenic influenza by culling infected and suspected birds. But we have adopted a cow plus vaccination strategy in China. We all know that influenza virus mutates very easily, and the mutation of the HA gene often causes genic variation, which will compromise the vaccine protective efficacy. The biggest challenge for the vaccination strategy is ensuring that vaccine matches the circulating viruses. To address this challenge, we continuously perform active surveillance in wild birds and domestic poultry by collecting about 14,000 samples per year to monitor the newly introduced viruses. We compare the antigenic properties of the newly detected H5 viruses with vaccine seed virus. If a clear difference is observed, the vaccine will be updated. We have established a platform for rapid generation of vaccine seed viruses. With this platform, an ideal vaccine seed virus can be generated within a week. A large number of migratory birds fly over China, and they introduced different H5 influenza viruses into China in the past years. This table listed the viruses carry different claders or subcladers of HA that have been introduced into China from 2005 to 2017. 8 different H5 vaccine seed viruses had been generated and used in China from 2004 to 2021 to control these viruses. When the virus in that clader is eradicated, the use of the vaccine against that virus will also cease. Viruses bearing the claders 22, 72, 234, 232, 2321F, and 2344G HA gene have been eliminated in China in different years before 2021. And the related vaccines have been stopped. As you all know that the H5N8 viruses bearing the clader 2344B HA gene caused numerous disease outbreaks in European countries since 2020. To carefully monitor the introduction of the H5N8 virus into China by wild birds, we collected over 14,000 samples from wild birds and domestic poultry from September 2020 to June 2021. We isolated 13 viruses from these samples. 22 viruses were isolated from wild birds, 8 viruses and 6 viruses were isolated from ducks and geese, respectively. Of note, we did not find any H5N8 virus from the samples we collected from chickens. To better understand their origin, as well as the timeline of invasion and spread of the H5N8 viruses in China, we constructed a time-resolved phylogenetic tree with the HA of 238 H5N8 viruses that were detected in 2020 and 2021 globally. We found that the HA of this H5N8 viruses formed 2 branches. The viruses in branch 1 was firstly detected in Poland in January 2020, and 1 year later, it was spread to China by Whooper swan. The viruses in branch 2 were firstly detected in Iraq in May 2020, and 5 months later, it was spread by Whooper swan to China. These branch 2 viruses were subsequently detected in other wild birds in China and were also spread to ducks and geese in small farms. As we know that the widely circulating H5N8 viruses have reassorted with many other viruses and generated different subtypes of H5 viruses in different countries, including the H5N1, H5N2, H5N3, H5N4, H5N5, and H5N6 viruses. The H5N1 virus was generated in Northern Europe in October 2020. After 1 year circulation in Europe and Africa, the H5N1 virus took over from H5N8 virus and started the large-scale intercontinental spread and caused thousands of outbreaks in 4 continents. It took 13 months for the H5N1 virus to be spread to China from Europe. The H5N1 virus also encountered complicated reassortment with other influenza viruses during its circulation in nature and formed at least 16 different genotypes. 4 of them were spread to China. Detailed phylogenetic analysis indicated that the 3 of the 4 kinds of H5N1 viruses were spread to China from North Europe, Russia, and Japan or Korea, respectively, before the introduction of H5N8 viruses. We were using H5RE11 and H5RE12 vaccines for preventing the H5N1 viruses bearing the clade 2321FHA and the H5N6 viruses bearing the clade 2344HHA in China. We found that the newly introduced H5N8 viruses show clear antigenic differences with the H5RE11 and H5R12 vaccines. When the H5N8 virus was firstly isolated in China, we really wanted to know if our vaccinated poultry could be well protected against this newly invasive virus. To answer this question, we purchased chickens and ducks from different poultry farms that were routinely vaccinated or unvaccinated and performed the challenge studying with H5N8 virus in the laboratory setting. The layer chickens had been vaccinated 3 times, but the ducks were vaccinated 1 or 2 times, and 1 group was not vaccinated. After being challenged with the lethal H5N8 virus, the unvaccinated SPF controlled chickens all died quickly, and all of the 10 unvaccinated ducks shed a high titer of viruses, and 2 of them died. However, the vaccinated chickens and ducks were completely protected against the H5N8 virus challenge. No virus shedding, no deaths. This cross-protection may have explained why mainland China lost only 10,000 birds, while over 163 million poultry died or were destroyed in other countries due to H5 virus infection from January 2020 to March 2022. To ensure the perfect match between the vaccine and the viruses that pose risk to our poultry, we have updated the H5 vaccine seed viruses in 2022, even though the previous vaccine could still provide complete protection against the emerging H5N8 virus. The currently used vaccine in China is a H5H7 trivalent inactivated vaccine produced with H5RE13, H5RE14, and H7RE4 seed viruses. Our studies have indicated that this vaccine can provide complete protection in chickens, ducks, and geese against the local H5N6 and H7N9 viruses, and also provide complete protection against the globally circulating H5N1 and H5N8 viruses, via the clade 2344BH18. Next, I would like to share a little bit about our experience in the H7N9 influenza control in China. As you may know that in February 2013, H7N9 virus emerged in the live poultry markets in China. Genetically, the H7N9 virus is a resultant of 3 different viruses. Those 2013 H7N9 viruses are low pathogenic in chickens, but they can easily infect humans and get a PB2627K mutation in humans. This mutation dramatically increases the virulence of the H7N9 virus to humans. After 4 years of circulation in nature, the viruses obtained 13 amino acids in their HA cleavage site and become highly pathogenic in chickens in Guangdong in 2017. And studies have indicated that the 2017 H7N9 highly pathogenic virus can also easily infect humans and get the PB2627K mutation in humans. The H7N9 viruses caused over 1,516 human infections in 5 waves from February 2013 to September 2017, with a mortality rate of nearly 14%. Of note, between October 2016 and September 2017, there were 766 human cases reported, which raised the concerns that an even larger number of human infections might occur in the subsequent wave. During the human H7N9 waves, in addition to culling poultry from poultry markets that were positive for the virus, tons of uninfected poultry and poultry products were destroyed because people were afraid to consume them, which caused considerable damage to poultry industries in China. 5 waves of human infections combined with the emergency of the highly pathogenic H7N9 virus suggested that stamping out was not a successful measure for H7N9 influenza control. Therefore, the control strategy was changed from stamping out to massive vaccination, and a H5H7 bivalent vaccine was started to be used to control both H5 and H7 avian influenza virus in China since September 2017. The prevalence of H7N9 virus in poultry was largely prevented, as evidenced by the fact that the isolation rate of H7N9 virus in poultry was immediately reduced by over 93% after birds were inoculated with the H5H7 vaccine. More importantly, the vaccination of poultry successfully eliminated human infections with H7N9 virus. Only 3 human cases and 1 human case were reported during the 6th and 7th waves, respectively, and no human case has been detected since April 2019. In summary, I would like to say that the vaccination strategy is very successful in China, as evidenced by the fact that several clades of H5 viruses have been eradicated and the pervasive H7N9 viruses have been nearly eliminated in China. Given that H5N1 viruses bear the clade 2344B gene, are widely circulating in wild birds and causing problems in domestic poultry in numerous countries around the world. Vaccination should be immediately and seriously considered as a control strategy. Any unnecessary obstacles to vaccination strategies should be removed immediately and forever. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, we'll now move on to the next presentation, which is from Guillermo Zavala on Latin America. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you all to change your thinking. This is not vaccination for eradication in most cases. The intention was to preserve food availability in these countries. In my daily work, I not only work in Latin America, I've worked for a number of years in the United States and in many other countries around the world. But today I'm going to give you a practical field perspective on avian influenza in Latin America, not necessarily a scientific presentation. Thank you. How do I advance this? Okay, there's been a number of relevant outbreaks of avian influenza in Latin America. The dates are approximations. They're not exactly when exactly all these outbreaks were originally detected. Let me start with Mexico. Mexico has been affected primarily by two avian influenza virus subtypes. H5N2, 1993, approximately, is when the first detection occurred serologically. A little bit later on, and we're talking 1994, avian influenza of moderate pathogenicity, as was described, with causing 50% mortality in experimentally infected birds. And eventually it turned into highly pathogenic avian influenza H5N2 within a relatively short period of time. Vaccination was implemented between 1994 and 95. And quickly, a few months after that, highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses H5N2 were no longer detected in the field. The intention, I assume, was not to eradicate, but this was a byproduct of implementing massive vaccination. And then I should say that since those dates of 1995 until the present time, H5N2, low pathogenic, is enzootic in Mexico and continues to be a significant problem, particularly for young birds, broilers, but it can infect birds of any ages. Mexico also has recorded a number of problems with H7N3. Here we're talking about highly pathogenic avian influenza. And unfortunately, some of the vaccines that were implemented at the beginning of the outbreak relied on viruses that were not exactly a good match. And that situation lasted for a number of months and years until gradually the vaccine industry was able to update and approximate a little bit better what vaccine master seeds would represent. Guatemala recorded its first H5N2 virus of the same lineage as the Mexican viruses in 1998. Belize, sometime between 2010 and 2015, started having incursions with the same lineage of virus, H5N2. But Belize has a very scattered industry with very small companies with not very high density, and it has been possible for them through biosecurity and stamping out to control, for the most part, H5N2. H5N2 also moved to the Dominican Republic and since about 2007 until the present time. And as you will see later, some of these countries continue to vaccinate routinely against some of these viruses and some don't. El Salvador recorded an outbreak of H5N2 in 2001, but it no longer has active cases since a number of years ago. El Salvador is a much smaller country than Holland. And its industry is a very dynamic industry, but not necessarily an industry that tends to have too many poultry health problems. And then we have to talk about Chile. Chile is probably a unique case in Latin America for several reasons. Chile is an exporting country. It easily exports at least 40% of its output, both in turkeys and in broiler meat and wine and many types of agricultural products. So as a result of that, they did have a surveillance program that was very, very strongly implemented years before they had their first outbreak. And that is essential to be able to detect your first outbreak. If you don't have a surveillance program or a robust one, you are going to have problems. So Chile was able to identify their first H7N3 outbreak very, very quickly and very efficiently. A number of people were involved in that, and the mission and the commitment of industry was to simply stamp out, eradicate, get rid of the virus. As it has occurred in other countries, the layer industry was very, very inclined to vaccination. And they wanted to vaccinate without necessarily correcting biosecurity, infrastructure, and equipment deficiencies that segment of industry had. Luckily for Chile, they were extremely successful. They were able to eradicate H7N3. And then they have had a number of incursions with low path H1 and H3 and H9 in turkeys, particularly turkey breeders. But they've been able to always successfully eradicate those outbreaks. As far as highly pathogenic avian influenza, only H7N3 has been an example for South America, as far as we know, in the case of Chile. I'm going to skip this one. I wanted to present this list to you because I think it's very important. I've had the opportunity and the privilege of working in many countries in North Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and where I had the opportunity to work with companies with challenges of this nature. Sometimes it's low pathogenic avian influenza, sometimes it's highly pathogenic avian influenza. And I think some of the items that make a situation much more prone to effective control and potentially eradication can be looked at in this list on the left-hand side. Whether a country has surveillance systems that are robust or not is absolutely important. You do have them in the European Union and many other parts of the world, but there are many countries that don't. They do have a surveillance system, but it's not necessarily a surveillance system that would be sufficient to detect outbreaks in a timely fashion, such that industry can respond and governments can respond fast enough. And you'd be surprised, some of the largest exporting countries in the world, some of which are situated in South America, they do have surveillance programs, but they are extremely, extremely weak and unrealistic for an effective detection of avian influenza outbreaks. An infrastructure for diagnostics sounds like a given, but if you don't have a network of proper diagnostics and the personnel and the reagents and the trained personnel, that has made a tremendous difference. And eventually, all of these countries have very good individual labs and infrastructure, whether it's government labs or private labs that can do very, very sophisticated work. But the question is not whether they can do it, it's how long does it take? And as we have learned in some of these recent outbreaks, you gotta be able to detect outbreaks immediately. And you gotta be able to, after confirmation of a case, you have to be able to dispose of the birds in a sanitary fashion if you really want to control. Same thing with reporting. Unfortunately, we do have not enough transparency in many situations. And we don't have transparency, there's no good harmonious collaboration between government, academia, industry, and whoever else needs to be involved. Emergency preparedness, another item that sounds like a given, But if you don't work very diligently and very intensively directly with industry in terms of being truly prepared on how to respond to a situation like this, the worst time, I always tell people, the worst time to really start acting and get ready to, okay, how am I going to do depopulation? How am I going to dispose the birds? What am I going to do with the organic matter? It's too late. And this is something that I can tell you the region is not and has not been ready in many situations. The same thing for depopulation, disposal methods. Obviously, the region does not have a compensation system, which is not a motivation for people to be transparent and report. That is essential, absolutely important. And so on and so forth. For virus elimination policies, there's poor definitions sometimes. The testing procedures on how to restock a farm that has been affected previously, and biosecurity. I would submit to you that many companies in the Latin American region have superb infrastructure, have incredibly good equipment, they have very good technical people, and they have excellent biosecurity. When I visit those regions, sometimes I have to take 3 showers and go through 3 changes of clothes and boots, disinfect my hands, everything else that has to be done. But there's no updating or adaptation of biosecurity for avian influenza as it has been discussed here. For example, line of separation. There, the line of separation is the perimeter of the farm. And we know that that is critical. And that is something that needs to be conveyed to many of the companies in the region. So let me talk to you briefly about which countries have implemented vaccination, whether it's for high path or low path avian influenza. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Guatemala implemented H5N2 vaccination for low pathogenic avian influenza viruses. And I am not sure, to be honest with you, whether this is an approved strategy, but the country does vaccinate against H5N2, and it does vaccinate against H7N3, particularly in commercial layers. The broiler industry uses very intensively vaccinations against H5 and N2. Chile has used vaccination only for turkeys and only for low pathogenic avian influenza, specifically H1N1 and H9 for their outbreaks of particularly since 2009. And they continue to vaccinate in some, if they consider that they have a risk. Chile also has a very good system for surveillance of wild birds. So they have multiple prongs that assist them in making decisions that are really objective decisions, as opposed to many other countries in the region. Colombia has had bouts with low pathogenic H9 and 2. I've heard today that there is a chance that Colombia has detected its first H5N1 in wild birds, but that's all I know. I don't know. It's just unconfirmed information. Dominican Republic broke with H5N2 back in 2009. The Dominican Republic continues to vaccinate against H5N2 using recombinant vaccines where the vector is fowlpox virus, but they also use kill vaccines against H5N2. El Salvador, even though they have not had outbreaks of avian influenza, low path or high path, they continue to vaccinate preventively in a preventive way, particularly their broiler breeders. And then finally, Mexico, you have a whole variety of products that have been developed, have been implemented ever since the 1990s. And examples of the vaccines that have been in use in Mexico include the following. H5N2 killed conventional vaccines, whole virus. H5N2 created by reverse genetics, where the idea is obviously to update the master seeds as often as possible. We also have examples of recombinant vaccines where the vector is fowlpox virus expressing H5, recombinant Newcastle disease virus, Lasota, which expresses also H5. And then similar examples for H7 and N3, where you do have conventional kill vaccines. Kill vaccines also developed using reverse genetics technology. H7 vaccines recombinant, where the vector is fowlpox virus and Newcastle disease virus. I would say that Mexico is probably one of the countries in the world that has the most experience with vaccination against avian influenza. And you might think, and you might question, well, why does Mexico continue, or other countries in the region? Why do they continue to have outbreaks? Is it because biosecurity is sloppy, or is it because there's too much challenge? And there's many, many reasons that would take a very long time to discuss. But in general, one of the main reasons is that you do have a lot of concentration, just like it has been discussed here today, and especially in commercial layers. And I'll show you a map of where the concentration of these industries are. And there's another thing that I want to mention. I want you to look at these videos, these very short video clips. These are broiler chickens, less than 2 weeks of age. They are infected with H5N2. The infection was documented, confirmed. And these viruses are classified as low pathogenic avian influenza, but they cause a mortality that totals 20, 25, 28% before 4 weeks of age. Yes, they're classified as low pathogenic, but in the field, they behave as moderately or somewhat pathogenic. It's not black and white. It's not low or high. There's a whole array of clinical presentations that we see, and our friends would agree with H9N2. It happens to be the case. Many of the cases that we see in the Middle East and North Africa are identical from the clinical point of view, with very significant mortalities in birds vaccinated or non-vaccinated against H9N2, for example. Okay, here's an interesting chart. It's a production and mortality chart for commercial layers in Mexico infected with H7N3. These birds were vaccinated with recombinant H7N3 recombinant vaccine at the hatchery, and then they were vaccinated 3 times with killed products. And here comes a whole array of questions. What is the matter with the vaccines or the vaccination procedures and the biosecurity and all the things that this group knows very, very well? I think one of the main problems is the inability in some of these countries to update the vaccines according to how the virus is evolving in the field. A lot of times, and I repeat myself, I probably shouldn't mention this, but a lot of times there's not fluid coordination between industry, biological industry, and government to allow for the necessary updates to occur as often as possible. Because you can vaccinate these birds multiple times. I can guarantee you that if you look at the HI results from these flocks, they're well over 10. And you would think with a titer of HI titer of 10, you should never have these results. So if you look at that graph, the birds didn't come in production on time. They never peaked. Production went down. There is very high mortality and a lot of production of eggs without an eggshell or eggs that break very easily during transportation and during handling those eggs. So there's a lot of reasons why this happens. And again, many of those reasons have actually been discussed unintentionally in this meeting. I want to share these 2 tables with you. They're not phylogenetic trees, but they're money trees. And they're very important to consider. This is what 2 years ago, I emphasize this. This is what 2 years ago it was costing, for example, the layer industry to vaccinate against one of these viruses, H5N2 or H7N3, per 1,000 doses, $250 in a high prevalence area. If you're in a low prevalence area, then it's quite a bit less. But I don't know what it is for you, capitalization cost. Correct me if I'm wrong, but probably in the US, probably in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 a pullet, 18 weeks of age. So if you have to spend 25 cents, 30 cents, 35 cents in vaccines and medication sometimes, it is a major proportion of your cost of production of good pullets. In broiler breeders, the cost is a little bit more diluted. But I have to also submit to you that there's been so many problems with H7N3 and H5N2 in Mexico, for example, that some of the biggest companies have taken their production out of the country. They have their breeders in the United States. Now they're shaking and trembling because of what's going on in the United States. But Here's a good example. All of a sudden, you can potentially run out of product. There's no eggs, there's no breeders, there's no product for you to put in the shackles. And there goes a tremendous, undescribable loss. So no phylogenetic trees, but money trees are in the end very, very important, as trade has been discussed. Different kinds of vaccines and what they were costing the industry per 1,000 doses 2 years ago. And you have examples there of fowlpox H5 recombinant. There's also a fowlpox H7 recombinant that's given in the hatchery very, very routinely. Newcastle disease virus vector vaccines expressed in H5. They're also fairly popular and a very good component, a very constant component of broiler programs. And since I'm mentioning this, I would like to share with you that if you look at what the best companies do in the middle of H7N3 territory, in the middle of H5N2, if you look at their intensive vaccination programs, I have to say, a recombinant at the hatchery, perhaps Newcastle H5 in the field at 12 to 14 days, and then a kill vaccine, whether it's in the hatchery or at 12 to 14 days. If you look at their performance figures, they're right together with the top quartile, top 25% performing companies of the United States. So it is possible to perform well, provided you do everything correctly, from ventilation, infrastructure, equipment, vaccinations, biosecurity, et cetera. It is possible. I'm about to finish. Yep. Yeah, this is my last slide. So primary challenges for successful vaccination: surveillance, accredited laboratories or licensed laboratories, whatever the terminology has to be. Emergency preparedness, very important. You have to have good governance and good relationships with government collaboration. Transparency, absolutely very important. If you don't report that you have an outbreak of avian influenza, and you mobilize birds, you mobilize manure, et cetera, you're hurting everybody else and yourself. Vaccine quality, obviously very important, and included in vaccine quality is updating vaccine master seeds. The cost of vaccines, the cost of vaccination, poultry concentration. I personally think that we cannot continue to build complexes where you have 5 million birds. Now the trend in the United States is to build houses where in one house you can have 600,000 birds in one house. I don't know, I as a veterinarian, I don't know how to handle disease problems like that. Finally, biosecurity. Lots of challenges with manure, with bird movements, and the need for intensive vaccination is a biosecurity problem itself. You have to have the infrastructure to be able to ask those people to take showers and to change and to be clean by the time they have to handle these birds individually. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. If we've got time, we'll take questions at the end of the session of presentation. So our next presentation, we're going to move to Indonesia. So I'd like to invite Dr. Hendra Wibowo to present.
Thank you, Ian. I would like to present a highly pathogenic avian influenza vaccination strategy, lesson learned from the implementation of influenza virus monitoring in Indonesia. So let's start with the features of the poultry production type, avian influenza outbreak and AI virus evolution in Indonesia. In Indonesia, poultry production type is classified into 4 sectors based on the production capacity and biosecurity measure conducted in farm. Sector 1 consists industrial integrated system with high level biosecurity. Sector 2, semi-integrated system with moderate level biosecurity. Sector 3, small commercial poultry with low level biosecurity. And Sector 4, village or backyard poultry, sometimes mixed farming with no or poor biosecurity. So this slide shows us the population at risk for infection. We have 3.8 billion birds, with consisting predominantly of broilers, 80%, a layer 10%, and then native chicken 8%, and duck 2%. And you can see here about 61% of total poultry population are located in Java. The first HPAI outbreak reported in mid-2003 due to infection of H5N1 K2.1. This clade evolved to multiple lineage and sublineage, but since 2015, the dominant of 2.1 lineage in poultry was replaced by H5N1 clade 2321C, which firstly emerged in duck farm in 2012 in Java. And then in late 2016, first low pet outbreak of H9N2 subtype reported in commercial layer farm. Sporadic HPAI cases are still reported in 2020 and 2021, particularly in a backyard chicken and duck farm, or in smallholder commercial farm, which vaccination is not regularly conducted and the biosecurity measure is low. This data based on the number of birds affected, and the majority of these are coming from the areas where poultry are concentrated, for example, from Java, Sumatra, East Kalimantan, and South Sulawesi. In terms of H5N1 evolution, based on the active and passive AI surveillance, at the moment, only 2 lineages of H5N1 detected and identified in poultry, clade 2132A, only in few number detected in 2015 and 2017, and clade 2321C, which become predominant clade of H5N1 and continue to mutate and divert. For low pet, also sporadically reported in commercial layer farm with vaccination is not regularly, this is sector 3, but with a smaller number of birds affected than high pet. And for the evolution, we see here there's some more significant changes in terms of phylogenetic inference, which all the H9N2 virus isolate cluster in Y280 clade. And then for control strategy, Indonesia focus in enhancing surveillance in poultry and livestock market, improving biosecurity in livestock, vaccination. We use inactivated kill vaccine in poultry, supported by monitoring of AI virus dynamic, and also certifying AI-free compartment where vaccination and surveillance is regularly carried out. It is very difficult to us, like Indonesia, to obtain or maintain AI-free status for all regions of the country. A more feasible concept is to obtain and maintain different animal health status for a poultry compartment within the country, which is in accordance with terrestrial code for animal health surveillance and zoning and compartmentalization. So this is the example, the outcome of HPAI free compartment. I don't know whether this one is, for me, for us, it's not very related, but some maybe is not receiving our product. But HPAI free compartment with vaccination and regular surveillance are in place, facilitating safe poultry and poultry product trades locally in Indonesia and internationally. You can see here there are some poultry product sold by some country. So for the vaccination strategy in Indonesia, there are 3 phases we have. The first phase in 2004 and 2006, we use mass vaccination using emergency vaccination using H5N1 local vaccine for all poultry sector 1 to sector 4. But due to limited vaccines in 2006, vaccination was targeted only to sector 3 and 4, sector 3, with local HPAI H5N1 and imported low pet vaccine H5N2. And sector 1 and sector 2 were encouraged to have vaccination in their own cost. In phase 2 in 2007 to 2011, vaccination in sector 4 discontinues due to logistic problem and resources. but the district and provincial veterinary services could propose funding for vaccination to sector 4 by their own budget. And continue vaccination in sector 1 to 3, particularly in bird with long lifespan, for example, breeder and layer farm. In this way, OFLU project started to assist the government of Indonesia for selection vaccine seed and challenge strain based on a genetic, antigenic, and challenge study. In phase 2, in 2012 until now, continued vaccination using inactivated kill vaccine in sector 1 to 3. And also we start vaccination in dog following the outbreak in 2012 for 2 years in 2013 to 2014. And in this phase, government only allowed vaccine seed based in local isolate that have been selected through genetic and antigenic matching analysis to circulating virus. And imported vaccine prohibited and was withdrawn from circulation in Indonesia since 2011. Since then, Indonesia, with assistance with OFLU, developed its capacity to do antigenic mapping and vaccine selection using local strain, including for HPAI S5N1 and low-PAT S9N2. And vaccine company also allowed to make monovalent or bivalent inactivated vaccine using their own seed strain as long as originated from local isolates and must be characterized genetically and antigenically and pass from registration, procedure, and vaccine efficacy trial. As influenza virus continue to evolve with assistance of OFLU, Government of Indonesia established Influenza Virus Monitoring Network. Influenza Virus Network, or IVM network, is veterinary laboratory network in Indonesia with aim to monitor the dynamic of influenza virus circulating in poultry through genetic and antigenic detection and characterization, including providing recommendation to government for vaccine seed and or challenge strain selection to ensure a close antigenic map. In IVM network, virus characterization begin with sample from active or passive surveillance, from disease investigation center to virus isolation or RT-PCR, followed by antigenic pre-screening. And representative or variant strain were then transferred to AI reference in the IC waters for full panel antigenic cartography, followed by HA sequencing and bioinformatic analysis. And finally, if the network found there is a majority virus show significant changes in terms of antigenic pattern compared to the existing vaccine seed or challenge strain, the IVM network will provide recommendation for government to update challenge strain or vaccine seed vaccine. In 2013 to 2014, IVM Online has been developed by Government of Indonesia with assistance with FAO and Australian Center for Disease Preparedness scientists, in order to accumulate data repository and genetic antigenic analysis of influenza viruses conducted by the IH's laboratory. And in 2017, an additional module has been added to IVM Online for linking IVM data with laboratory and epidemiological data from National Animal Health Information System. So we have 4 modules here: isolate, antigenic, genetic, and surveillance module. However, development in sequencing technology, including whole genome sequencing using next generation sequencing technique, has changed the process of virus characterization since 2018, from which genetic data can be used to direct and to select which isolate to be proceeded for antigenic cartography. This is an example of the IVM output during HPAI surveillance between 2009 and 2014. We saw that 213 challenge antigens show low cross reaction. You can see here there was a significant antigenic distance of newly viruses in that time to previously circulating virus. So a need to change the challenge strain. And also, IVM network successfully identified and characterized a new clade 2321 in that time, incursion into Indonesia through genetic and antigenic analysis, lead to successful and timely development of H5N1 clade 2321 vaccine, inactivated kill vaccine that produced locally. Between 2014 and 2017, another benefit of IVM Olen is shown by the need of update challenge strain for vaccine efficacy due to mutation of clade 2321C S5N1 and clade 2132. And we also provided recommendation for master seed vaccine to government following the identification of low-fat H9N2. And also again in 2018 to 2021, IVM Olen also providing recommendation to government to update master seed vaccine due to significant mutation of recent high-fat H5N1 221C. So the recommendation for updating vaccines seed was supported by vaccine efficacy trial, which showing in this screen you can see one of vaccine candidate TGM 1076 2017 strain provided the best protection against infection and virus shedding, and come out with the decree from DG. In summary, S5N1 still endemic in some area, particularly in Java, with clade 2321C now become a predominant clade since 2015, replacing clade 2132. And low-fat H9N2 was also detected in late 2017. And we only have two virus circulating that causing an outbreak in Indonesia, high-fat 2321C and low-fat H9N2. We're not hoping for 2344 coming to Indonesia, so hopefully not. And the government of Indonesia has taken several strategies to control AI virus, including improved surveillance and diagnostic capacity for early detection, and also improve biosecurity practices for poultry farm, particularly in sector 3, and also in sector 1 and sector 2, and improve quality of vaccine that antigenically match with the circulating virus to provide better immunity and protectivity, and also increase the number of HPAI free quality compartment. Vaccination is important approach or tool for control strategy in endemic country, but again, it should be supported by post-vaccination monitoring and should be strengthened by contingent molecular surveillance to provide better understanding of HPAI virus dynamic. And IVM network is quite relevant to other countries. It's going to establish a national laboratory network for AI surveillance and other pathogens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very interesting insight to the evolving situation in Indonesia. So we now move on to our last presentation in this session, and this is from Egypt, Dr. Arafa Abdul Sattar from the RLQP in Egypt.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation, this important meeting. I would like to discuss in summary the situation of vaccination against HPAI in Egypt. Very similar like discussed now in China and Latin America and in Indonesia. Very similar aspect in Egyptian experience. First, totally we have about 1.4 billion commercial birds scattered in as grandparent and broiler breeders and layer breeders and commercial layers. Beside backyard bird, ducks, of course, turkey, and we produce about 14 billion table eggs. We have now registered 40 even influenza-free compartments in last update in this year. So we started our Egyptian broiler production can be separated according to the distributed for about 2 million backyard and 2 million companies, commercial companies, and the majority from farmers, irregular farms distributed all over the country. And this distribution mainly in Delta area in northern Egypt, about 65%, with a lower number in Upper Egypt and other regions in the country. So the main problem here in broiler production sector in regard to vaccination. For H5 virus in Egypt, the first detected virus was in 2006, H5N1. From that time, the virus spread and causing to both commercial and household sector losses. And the virus remained endemic. We declared endemic status from 2008 till now. However, during more than 15 years, we decided to vaccinate soon after the introduction in 2006. The virus was H5N1 clade 2.2.1. From that time, the virus started to mutate and divided into different subclades like variant clade 2.211 and the 2.211A in 2008. In 2014, another virus emerged related to clade 2.1.2 that led to increased number of human cases. And that time, Egypt became the first country all over the world recorded high incidence in human infection of H5N1. In 2011, H9N2 was introduced and still endemic from that time till now. Also in 2016, we have H5N8 highly pathogenic virus. So all these subtypes continuously circulate and may have some interaction. The first, for example, H5N2 as a reassortant virus has been emerged and isolated in 2018. Recently, in 2020, another introduction of H5N1 related to clade 2.3.4.4 and spreading to the African countries from and also recorded in Europe at the time and causing some human infection. From 2008, Egypt recorded the highest mass vaccination strategy, about more than 28 million doses from a vaccine distributed in commercial sector. So in summary, we can notice that from February 2006 till now, different viruses introduced and can interact with each other. H5N1 in 2006, then H9N2 in 2011. The virus itself divided into different clades. The virus mutate. And then H5N1 has been replaced in 2017 by the new introduction of H5N8 of clade 2.3.4b. Also, few cases recorded from H5N1, the recent virus from migratory bird in 2020. The cases usually appear to be seasonal, so the seasonality is very clear. If you take over the last decade from 2012 till now, we have seasonal increase in winter months for H5 and even for H9 cases also. So for the H5N1, the clade 2.1.2 has been widely spread in Egypt in 2015 and causing, as we discuss, a lot of cases for human transmission that highlights the importance to overcome and to make action, to take action for this virus. Also, not only for poultry production, but also this virus was highly spread and infected humans at that time. Then virus also can be recorded and make losses in poultry production. However, when replaced in the new virus now currently circulating H5N1 of clade 2.3.4.4 is completely different virus. Very rare. There is no cases transmitted to human, and it is very close to the virus already circulating from 2016 of H5N8 virus from the same clade. But still, we have very few cases reported. For example, this year, one case only. So different studies against H5N8 introduction and virus characterization for the genetic characterization of the circulating viruses from this subtype. And also recorded one case of H5N2 virus from 2019. It was the first reassorted virus, natural reassortment between highly pathogenic H5 and the low pathogenic N2 virus, causing this case H5N2 highly pathogenic virus. But fortunately, this virus was not spread at that time. So the current situation here, we have still outbreaks recorded in poultry. We have, for example, this year from January till now, we have 54 reported cases. From most of them from live bird markets. We do surveillance on live bird markets to detect infected cases, usually from ducks. Also from slaughterhouse, one case of H5N1. There is no human case from 2017. The most important laboratory finding here is characterizing the virus as a highly pathogenic virus, placing the common circulating strain of H5N8 of clade 2.3.44b. With regular mutation every year, we can find some mutation characterizing the virus, but still have no marker for Tamiflu resistance, for example, and they carry the structure of highly pathogenic virus related to avian species, not human. Some mutations related to antigenic sites that cause importance for monitor genetic characterization of recent viruses for vaccine study. So how to control the virus? Based on the immune system of the chicken, we should apply vaccination to raise immune system immunity against the virus infection. So the vaccine here will lower symptoms and lower virus shedding and increase resistance of bird toward the disease. So this is the main strategy to take action against infected cases. Also, action should be taken as a rapid response team related to the veterinary authority, general organization of veterinary services, make rapid response measures when positive case reported. This including a culling of infected bird inside this farm or this location, even in household or farm. Then make sanitary and disposal of dead carcass and the culling of birds, litter, and infected premises, also cleaning and disinfection. Then make targeted surveillance about from 3 to 5 kilometers in the area. Upon this, we conduct awareness and training, educational training for the farmers or household keepers at this area, and do surveillance for 21 days for any suspected new cases in this FOCA. We consider here the village as is in the epidemiological unit. Then we do ring vaccination from outside to inside for household poultry about 9 kilometer diameter. So the vaccines distributed in the country include H5 vaccines used either inactivated or recombinant HPT vaccine. The inactivated either from imported source, H5N1 or H5N2, or from Chinese origin, RE5, RE6, RE8, or from locally produced companies from local strains like H5N1 or H5N8. Total about 27 vaccine now registered and commonly used. So this is figures about the vaccine use in broilers, about 25, from 20 to 25 in reassorted HPT vaccine, about 40% local inactivated, about 35 imported vaccine. And this is the most important seed viruses located. Of course, this list has been updated recently by common vaccines used. As we see here, different kind of viruses like classical all the seeds H5N2 or Chinese origin H5N6, H5N8, H5N1, or even also the recombinant vaccine baculovirus H5, and we have now H5N1 and H5N8 of locally originated vaccine, as we mentioned, from different clades. But all of these vaccines should be evaluated in central laboratories to confirm their efficacy against local common circulating strain. So we have more than now 15 years applying vaccination against the highly pathogenic avian influenza. Of course, the vaccine have benefits and have, in some cases, have drawbacks, but many papers published to monitor this vaccine or to evaluate the vaccine status in Egypt as general or referring to special case. Some report showed failure in vaccination in some areas. This is expected when you use vaccine all over a long time of period. We can expect to have vaccine escape mutant. Also, antigenic drifting from 2010, the first strain in 2008 has been occurred, vaccine escape mutant. And a lot of studies was arising here and confirms that mutation related to antigenic binding site that could make vaccine escape mutant. And also this study indicated that emergence of virus antigenically drifted from vaccine applied in the field. And this could potentially reduce vaccine efficacy and responsible for vaccination failures. This is the main problem when applying the vaccine. Generally, another studies discussing cross-reactivity among strains in relation to field virus. In this study, only one vaccine based on Egyptian virus can have this cross-reactivity. So we started from that time to think about to use vaccine from local virus used. Also, papers, Dr. Erika Speckman, variation in protection of 4 divergent avian influenza virus vaccine seed strains against 8 clade 2.21, the old clade in Egypt, and 2.11, this is a mutant variant virus from H5N1 highly pathogenic variant in poultry. And they relate the difference in protection is related relative to one another based on a challenge virus. So the challenge virus here is the key factor for vaccine efficacy. The studies related to vaccine efficacy evaluation also, this study describing the situation as general in Egypt, indicating that the poultry vaccination program is failing in some aspects. This was in 2016 when the new virus introduction of H5N8 virus has been coming and based on data available in their surveillance program. Another data indicates that vaccination can be effective in backyard setting if applying planning considering the species covered, because there is marked response between chicken and ducks, for example. Also, there is the paper describing discrepancy in efficacy of H5 vaccines in different group of viruses from clade 2.344 in 2018 as a recent virus, indicating also virus shedding reduction and the protection efficacy of studied vaccines were variable, and the field vaccine should be reconsidered. Another extensive manuscript describing the most recent vaccine and evaluating against the virus of group H5N8 in Egypt. Some vaccines, commercial vaccine is working good. However, others is not sufficient to protect birds or prevent shedding against recent virus circulating. Also, the efficacy of current vaccine should be regularly evaluated and updated to fully protect protection. So it is difficult to reach to the full protection, but at least to acceptable level under the field condition. Also, another paper describing the vaccination regime with prime boost vaccination in regarding HPT vaccine, recombinant, have a highest and earlier protection that can hence recommended for the broiler production sector in endemic areas. This was against H5N1. And in another study, examining 2 viruses of clade H5N1 221 and 2211, the variant virus, and also gave good protection. Another paper for for HVT vaccine, also recombinant, efficacy of recombinant turkey herpes virus H5 vaccine in preventing the transmission of heterologous highly pathogenic H5N8 group 2.3.44b, a challenge virus in commercial broiler and layer pullets. Finally, for cross-clade protection against using this HVT vaccine, also indicating that expressing H gene of this vaccine providing protection against wide range of clades like 2.2 and 2.1.3 viruses and H5N2 virus. Also, H5 recombinant had provide high level of clinical protection against antigenically drifted viruses. So, in conclusion, Egypt is remain endemic for H5N8 now since 2016. We have recorded 54 positive cases this year from different sectors. Vaccination is employed as part of control strategy to limit the disease. These vaccines used from different clades like H5N1, H5N2, H5N3, and H5N8. The vaccines are evaluated against the recent circulating virus of 2021, H5N8. We can conclude also that vaccination can be a useful tool for controlling the disease and prevent sudden loss of birds due to a new virus introduction. However, long-term vaccination can develop variant strains causing vaccination failure. So selection of a good vaccine candidate is still the main target for vaccine companies. They also have should have good general good manufacturing practice and vaccine know-how to pass the challenge against field virus. Vaccine evaluation against recent circulating viruses is important to regularly update knowledge about vaccine efficacy. So this is a process should be carried out, for example, every year to ensure the efficacy of the currently used vaccine. Finally, some recommendations related to strengthening the vaccination strategy as general control strategy against highly pathogenic avian influenza, to increase surveillance, increase awareness, increase laboratory activity related to whole genome sequence, not only rapid characterization. We need now to know the new reassortant viruses that should take complete genome analysis. Also training for poultry producer, resources for lab diagnosis, and cooperation among reference labs in OIE. Regulation should be reviewed. Vaccination, as we discussed in this meeting, is still a trade restriction. So regulation should be updated. However, we applying a free compartment, it's helpful for trade, but updating testing schedule for time are required to also review the laboratory regulation for this compartment system. Thank you very much.